What if I told you that one of the greatest battles for independence was won before the first blow was struck? In the early 14th century, Scotland was a broken nation, bleeding under the heel of the mighty English Empire. But in 1314, on the marshy fields by the stream Bannockburn, an army of rebels led by an outlaw king challenged fate. It was not just a battle, it was an act of desperation that became a masterpiece of military tactics. They faced the most powerful war machine of their time, armed only with spears and unbending will. The English army came to crush, the Scots to die, but to die free. Watch the video through to the end, and you will learn how Robert the Bruce used the very land of Scotland as his greatest ally, turning the enemy's strengths into his defeat. Are you ready to discover the truth that Scotland's hero began his path as a fugitive and a murderer? To understand Bannockburn, you must first understand the man at its heart, Robert the Bruce. After the fall of William Wallace, Scotland plunged into darkness. Its nobility swore fealty to the English crown. Bruce himself was one such noble, navigating between loyalty and ambition. His path to the crown was marked not by glory, but by a desperate act in Greyfriars Church. There he confronted his main rival for the throne, John Comyn, and in the ensuing argument committed the irreparable. This act instantly made Bruce an enemy not only of England, but of the powerful Comyn clan, and also excommunicated him from the church. He became an outlaw in threefold. His hurried coronation in 1306 was more an act of defiance than a triumph by a handful of followers. English King Edward I of England, known as Hammer of the Scots, responded with predictable fury. Bruce's army was immediately crushed, his family captured, his brothers executed. Scotland seemed to have lost its last hope. Bruce himself was forced to flee, becoming a ghost in his own land. He hid on the Hebrides and, according to legend, in Ireland. These years were not just years of survival, they were years of transformation. From a cautious noble, he became a hardened guerrilla leader. He learned that he could not defeat England on open ground by its rules. Instead, he had to write his own. It was in this period, according to the famous legend, that Bruce found inspiration in a simple spider. Watching it spin and fail again and again, Bruce resolved himself. He realized that perseverance and patience were his only weapons. True or not, the story perfectly reflects the essence of his new strategy. He began slowly but surely to weave his own web across Scotland. Bruce's return was slow and painful. He began with small, sudden attacks on minor English garrisons. He used terrain knowledge, luring enemies into bogs and ravines. He avoided large battles he could not win and focused on exhausting the enemy's resources. Every small victory gave him new supporters and strengthened belief that the struggle was not hopeless. He systematically recaptured one castle after another. His tactics were ruthless but effective. Having seized a fortress, he often ordered its walls destroyed. Bruce understood that he didn't have resources to hold all those castles against English sieges. Better to deny the enemy bases than to try to defend what he could not protect. It was a war of attrition, a war of will. Bruce bet that the English crown would eventually tire. After the death of the powerful Edward I, his son, Edward II of England, ascended the throne. The new king lacked the military grip and resolve of his father. That gave Bruce precious time to consolidate his power and gather strength. The battle for Stirling became the battle for all Scotland. Very interesting to hear your point of view. What do you think about how the desperate act of one man can change the course of history? Write about it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Do you want to know the secret that turned England's greatest army into its chief weakness? When word of the bet at Stirling reached Edward II, he saw his chance. It was a prospect to end the Scottish usurper king with one blow and finish his father's work. Edward declared a muster of troops England had never seen. From all England, Wales, and even Ireland armies gathered at the border. This was not just an army, it was the embodiment of feudal might. Thousands of knights in shining armor, the cream of the English aristocracy, formed its core. Heavy cavalry was the main argument of medieval war, and Edward had it in abundance. Each knight commanded squires and servants. turning the army into a moving city. They were supported by thousands of infantry, including the fearsome Welsh archers, whose longbows struck fear throughout Europe. By some estimates, the English army reached 20,000 men, including over 2,000 heavily armed mounted knights. By contrast, Bruce's entire army numbered no more than 6,000 or 7,000 warriors. On paper, this wasn't a battle. It was a show of force. The Scots' chances seemed negligible. The English army was so confident in its victory that their march north resembled a triumphal parade. The vast baggage train carried not only provisions and siege gear, but luxuries, wine, and even court poets who were to celebrate the impending triumph. This overconfidence was Edward II's first and main enemy. They were not marching to fight. They were marching to accept surrender. Robert the Bruce, witnessing this avalanche, faced a crushing choice. Many of his counselors begged him to withdraw, revert to guerrilla tactics, and not risk everything on one battle. But Bruce understood that another chance might not come. He had to fight, but fight on his terms. He could not allow the English to choose the battlefield. He had to force them to fight where their numbers and cavalry would be useless. He chose ground south of Stirling Castle, a few miles from the English objective. It was terrain cut by streams and covered by woodland. The key feature was the Bannockburn stream. Bruce decided to turn the land into a deadly trap. The English king, approaching Stirling, saw the Scottish army on a hill. He ignored the advice of his more experienced commanders, who urged him to flank the enemy or allow his troops to rest. Edward wanted glory and wanted it immediately. He ordered his army to prepare for an attack, neglecting to perform proper reconnaissance of the terrain on which they were to fight. The English army, blindly advancing, did not yet know its fate was sealed. Do you think brute strength always loses to craft and knowledge of terrain? In the next chapter, we will reveal the main secret of the Scottish defense that changed the rules of war. I will reveal Bruce's most guarded secret, which turned the land into a weapon. When one speaks of Bruce's genius, they often mean his tactics on the day of battle. But the true uniqueness of his plan lay in what happened several weeks before it. Bruce did not just choose the battlefield, he created it. He looked at forests and marshes not as obstacles, but as building materials for his open-air fortress. His plan was revolutionary for its time. Instead of relying solely on the resilience of his warriors, he decided to use the greatest force in the world, English cavalry, against itself, using the very ground. His engineers and soldiers worked day and night, turning the approaches to the Scottish positions into a 14th century minefield. This was the first large-scale operation of its kind to reshape terrain for military purposes. The main threat was the knights. Their frontal attack, their charge, could break any infantry line. To stop this armored battering ram, Bruce ordered the digging of hundreds of pits, known as wolf pits. These were deep, narrow traps into which a horse's leg would fall, crippling both horse and rider. But Bruce went further. He ordered these pits to be carefully concealed. Thin branches and turf covered them. They were invisible to those attacking. The entire area in front of the Scottish positions was littered with these deadly surprises. The English cavalry, charging at full speed, would run over ground that could open beneath them. The second element of this devilish defense system were caltrops, or Scottish hedgehogs. These were small but incredibly effective devices. Sharp spikes welded or tied together such that one spike always pointed upward. The Scots produced thousands of such devices and generously scattered them on the path of the expected attack. Caltrops were a cavalry's nightmare. They easily punctured unprotected hooves, inflicting horrible injuries. A horse stepped on one and lost control. This simple technology, known from Roman times, became a strategic weapon in Bruce's hands. This was not merely passive defense. Bruce deliberately left several clear lanes within these fields of traps. These lanes were visible to his men, but not to the enemy. This way, he could not only stop the attack, but channel it into the direction he wanted, into pre-prepared killing zones where Scottish spearmen waited. That was the enemy's fatal mistake. Give this video a like if you too value military cunning over brute strength, and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new analyses of the greatest tactical geniuses in history. What happened next should not have occurred according to the rules of war. On June 23rd, the English vanguard approached the Scottish positions. The English were impatient and eager to engage. At the head of the column rode Sir Henry de Bohun, young and fiery, nephew of the Earl of Hereford. He thirsted for glory and honor. Suddenly, de Bohun saw what made his heart stop. Ahead of the Scottish ranks on a small war horse, surrounded by his commanders, stood Robert the Bruce himself. Unlike de Bohun, clad in full-plate armor, Bruce was lightly equipped and armed only with a battle axe. He was easily recognizable by the golden circlet on his helmet. For de Bohun, it was the chance of a lifetime. He saw not a king, but a rebel. He saw the opportunity with one lance thrust to end the war, decapitate the uprising, and cover himself with eternal glory. Without a moment's hesitation and ignoring orders, he spurred his mighty warhorse and charged. Picture this: a knight in steel on a heavy charger, charging at full speed with lance at the ready. Opposite him, the king on a small, nimble horse with only a battle axe. By all the rules of knightly combat, Bruce had no chance. His own guard screamed in horror at the risk he was taking. But Bruce did not flinch. He was not just a king, but a seasoned warrior who had endured years of guerrilla war. He calmly awaited until de Bohun closed the distance. The knight already readied his lance for Bruce's chest. At the last moment, Bruce performed a brilliant maneuver. He sharply spurred his horse to the side. The huge de Bohun, with his lance, thundered past, unable to redirect his charge. In that moment, when the knight sped by, Bruce rose in his stirrups and delivered a formidable blow with his battle axe. The blow was precise and terrifying. It struck the English knight's helm squarely. De Bohun fell lifeless from his horse. The duel that should have been England's triumph ended in a matter of seconds with a humiliating Scottish victory. Day one was for Scotland. But do you think a single duel could really decide the fate of an entire war? In the next chapter, you will learn that it was only the beginning of Bruce's master plan. Although Bruce's duel with de Bohun entered the legends, it was not the only important event of day one. While all eyes were on that dramatic moment, another part of the English army launched a treacherous move. A detachment of several hundred elite English knights under Sir Robert Clifford and Sir Henry de Beaumont attempted to outflank the Scottish positions. Their aim was to break through to the besieged Stirling Castle and thus fulfill the formal terms of the bet. This maneuver was tremendously dangerous for Bruce. If the English had succeeded in linking with the castle garrison, it would not only boost their morale, but also create the threat of a flank attack on the Scottish army the next day. Robert the Bruce noticed this move. He turned to his nephew Thomas Randolph, Earl of Moray, and according to tradition said, "Look, nephew, the rose from your wreath has fallen." Randolph, whom Bruce had assigned to guard exactly that flank, realized his mistake. He immediately gathered his schiltron, the Scottish spear formation, and rushed to intercept the English cavalry. The schiltron was the Scots' answer to the knightly menace. It was a dense formation of infantry bristling with long spears, resembling a giant hedgehog. The English knights, seeing what appeared to be only a single detachment of infantry facing them, were overjoyed. They were confident that their heavy cavalry, charging on firm ground, would crush this mob of peasants. They wheeled their horses and with the usual war cry, "Charge." This was a classic scenario, a steel wave ready to sweep everything away. But Randolph and his men were not a mob. They were battle-hardened veterans trained by Bruce. They closed ranks, extended their 3-meter spears, and prepared to meet the blow. The front row knelt, thrusting their spears into the ground, while the rear rows raised theirs at the ready. A nearly impenetrable wall of wood and steel formed. The English cavalry smashed into this wall. The result was stunning. The knights, whose strength lay in a charging strike, could not break the formation. Their attack faltered. The schiltron held like a rock. English commanders launched wave after wave, attempting to find a weak spot in the Scottish defense. But the Scots held. They repulsed attack after attack. The field around the schiltron filled with bodies of warriors and fallen horses. The English knights, compressed in a narrow space and unable to muster speed for another charge, became easy targets. The Scots fought with ferocity, knowing they had nowhere to fall back. This miniature battle presumably lasted a long time. Eventually, the English cavalry, suffering heavy losses and achieving no success, were forced to withdraw. Their pride was crushed, An elite detachment of knights was defeated in open field by a group of infantry, a scenario unheard of at the time. What if I told you that the English army's main mistake was made not in battle, but during camp? The night after the first day of fighting became fatal for the English. Instead of withdrawing, regrouping, and assessing the new threat, Edward II made the worst decision possible. He ordered his army to camp overnight on that very marshy lowland, the Carse, beside the Bannockburn stream. That decision was dictated by stubbornness and refusal to acknowledge the enemy's strength. The English commanders could not believe that a handful of Scots posed a real threat. They still regarded the first day's events as an unfortunate accident. However, the land they chose for the camp was their death sentence. It was a low, boggy ground, squeezed between a stream and steep slopes. The army, numbering tens of thousands of men, found itself packed into a narrow space where there was no room for maneuver. Knights, infantry, baggage, all mixed in one giant disorganized mass. The soldiers were exhausted from the long march and pairing minor skirmishes. The entire night the English army lay in discomfort. Horses bogged in mud. Warriors could not find a dry place to rest. Discipline collapsed. Quarrels and blame erupted among commanders. No proper guard was posted and no reconnaissance carried out. They were trapped by their own doing. Meanwhile, in the Scottish camp, the atmosphere was very different. The victory of day one had invigorated the army. Bruce gathered a war council. He understood perfectly that the English, despite their failures, were still a fearsome force. He proposed to his commanders to retreat into the hills, content with the victories so far. But his warriors thought differently. They were emboldened. They saw fear in the eyes of the English. They believed in their king and in their plan. It was unanimously decided to stay and fight at dawn. The Scots spent the night in prayer and preparation for the decisive clash. Their morale was at its peak. While the English tossed and turned in the mud, one Scottish knight, Sir Alexander Seton, deserted from the English camp. A Scot serving under the English, seeing the miserable state of Edward II's army, and inspired by Bruce's successes, decided to defect. He secretly came to Bruce and told him everything. Seton reported the full chaos in the English camp. He told of demoralization, of lack of order, and that the army was locked in a muddy lowland. He begged Bruce to attack at dawn, claiming the victory would be easy. This intelligence became decisive. Bruce's master plan entered its final phase. What is it like to realize that your greatest strength has become your greatest weakness? In the next chapter, you will learn how the Forest of Spears went on the offensive. At dawn on the second day, the battle began with a scene that stunned the English. The entire Scottish army, arranged in 3 massive schiltrons, left their fortified positions on the hill and began slowly but inexorably to descend onto the plain. This was a breach of all medieval warfare rules. Infantry, even more so when outnumbered, never attacked cavalry in an open field. But Bruce accepted the risk. The sight was terrifying. 3 gigantic hedgehogs of thousands of waving spears like a single living organism moved toward the English army. The English, taken off guard by this maneuver, fell into confusion. They tried hastily to form battle lines, but the boggy, narrow terrain gave them no chance. Their army was a mass squeeze between advancing Scots and the stream behind them. English knights, the pride of the nation, tried what they knew best, to attack. The Earl of Gloucester led his heavy cavalry in a desperate charge at Edward Bruce's schiltron. But this was not a coordinated charge, but fragmented attempts by individual knights to break the wall of spears. They attacked without support from their archers, who were stuck somewhere behind. The cavalry attack smashed against the Scottish spears. The schiltrons, which had proved their strength the day before now, worked with even more effectiveness. The advancing infantry simply swallowed the cavalry units that could not break formation or retreat. It was methodical and cold-blooded confrontation. The battle became a massive crush. The English army, unable to deploy its forces, was forced to fight in atrocious conditions. The front rows fought desperately, while the rear rows, blind to what was happening, kept pressing forward, worsening the chaos. English infantry and knights merged into one mass. Robert the Bruce kept in reserve his own schiltron. He watched the battle and waited for the right moment. He saw the English ranks begin to falter. He saw their thrust weaken. The battle reached its climax and both sides fought on the edge of their strength. At this critical moment, the English commanders finally realized they needed to deploy their long-range weapons, the Welsh archers. Archer units were brought to the flank and began to volley arrows into the Scottish schiltrons. This was the only real threat to the dense wall of spears. Arrows found gaps in armor and brought confusion into the Scottish ranks. Bruce was ready for this. He immediately gave an order, awaited by Sir Robert Keith, commander of a small unit of Scottish cavalry. This was just a few hundred horsemen Bruce had reserved precisely for this purpose. Keith's unit swooped from behind the hill and smashed into the flank of the English archers. The archers, without protection, were not ready for such a strike. They had neither spears nor armor to oppose cavalry. Within minutes, the whole archer unit was scattered. The Scottish cavalry performed brilliantly, neutralizing the only force that could have shifted the battle in favor of the English. The elimination of the archers became the turning point. Deprived of their only support, the English army was left alone against the advancing schiltrons. Their morale, already eroded, finally collapsed. The English knights, the pride and glory of the nation, were the first to flee. As soon as the English knights, pinned and unable to fight, turned back, panic spread throughout the English army. The flight of the cavalry, their main striking force, became the signal for the rest of the army. The formation, already barely holding, completely disintegrated. What had been a battle turned into a chaotic rout. English soldiers, infantry, and knights alike flew back toward the Bannockburn stream, which now became not an obstacle, but the only route to safety. But the stream and its boggy banks became a death trap. Men and horses sank into the mud as they tried to cross. The Scottish spearmen, abandoning their heavy formation, pursued them relentlessly. At that moment, another episode broke. English will completely. From behind the hill, with shouts and clamor, poured a new army. These were the Scottish small folk, camp followers, cooks, craftsmen, and all those trailing the army. Armed with whatever they had, sticks, pitchforks, kitchen knives, they charged the fleeing English, sensing victory. The English army, in full chaos, took this mass for fresh Scottish reserves. That was the final straw. Panic became universal. Warriors threw away weapons, shields, armor, everything that slowed their flight. The defeat was total and crushing. King Edward II himself barely avoided capture. His personal guard, seeing the battle lost, forcibly seized the king and dragged him from the field. They broke through to Stirling Castle, hoping for refuge. But the castle's commander, Sir Philip Mowbray, knowing it was over, refused the king entry. He rightly pointed out that if the king entered the siege, he'd be captured as well. Edward had no choice but to continue his humbling flight. Pursued by the Scots, he raced south without stopping until reaching safety behind the walls of Dunbar Castle. From there, he sailed back to England. The king who came to conquer Scotland fled like a mere fugitive, leaving his army to its fate. English losses were catastrophic. Thousands of soldiers died on the field, in the stream, in the marshes. A huge number of noble lords and knights were captured. The entire English aristocracy assembled for this war was either dead or a prisoner of Bruce. The Scots captured the entire English baggage train. The spoils were unimaginable. The Scots, who had fought years of guerrilla war and poverty, overnight became owners of vast riches. The English treasury, armor, weapons, horses, provisions, everything fell to the victors. But the greatest prize were the noble prisoners. Robert the Bruce proved himself not only a brilliant strategist, but also a wise politician. He did not execute his prisoners. Instead, he used them for huge ransoms, and even more importantly, for exchanges. He traded English lords for his wife, daughter, and other family members who had languished in English captivity for years. The victory at Bannockburn was absolute. It was not just a military defeat of England, it was a national humiliation. The army once considered invincible was ground to dust by an army half its size, one they had scorned. A battle that was supposed to end Scotland's independence instead cemented it. For Scotland, this was a moment of birth. The victory united the country around its king. Robert the Bruce, from outlaw and rebel, became a national hero, a savior who gave his people freedom. His name was etched forever in history. The victory on the battlefield was won, but the war was far from over. Bannockburn had forced England to halt its invasions, Yet the English crown still refused to recognize Robert the Bruce as king or Scotland as an independent state. Bruce had won the battle, but now he had to win the peace. And for that, he would wield the pen instead of the spear. The consequences of Bannockburn were not only military but political. The victory so strengthened Bruce's authority that he was able to unite all of Scotland's nobility around him. No longer merely a factional leader, he became the undisputed King of Scots. This allowed him to move to the next stage of struggle, diplomacy. In 1320, 6 years after the battle, the Scottish aristocracy gathered at Arbroath Abbey and drafted one of the most remarkable documents in history. It was the Declaration of Arbroath, a letter addressed to the Pope. In it, the Scottish barons recounted their nation's story and justified their right to independence. This document was a direct outcome of the Bannockburn victory. It was written with the confidence and pride of a people who had proven their right to exist. The declaration proclaimed that Scotland had been independent for centuries and that its people would never submit to English rule. The most famous lines of the declaration still inspire admiration. The Scottish lords told the Pope that they fought not for glory, wealth, or honors, but for freedom alone, which no honest man gives up but with his life. The declaration also contained a striking statement about the nature of kingship. The barons declared their loyalty to Robert the Bruce because he had saved their nation, but they added that if he were ever to betray them or submit their kingdom to England, they would immediately drive him out as an enemy and choose another king. It was a revolutionary idea for the 14th century, that a king ruled not by divine right, but by the consent of his people, and that his foremost duty was to defend their freedom. Bannockburn had given the Scots not only a military triumph, but also a political philosophy ahead of its time. The Declaration of Arbroath had a profound impact on the Pope and on Europe as a whole. It presented the Scots not as wild rebels, but as a civilized nation fighting for a just cause. Though formal recognition of independence was still years away, this document laid the diplomatic foundation for future peace. England, exhausted by internal strife and unable to mount another invasion, was eventually forced to negotiate. In 1328, the Treaty of Northampton was signed. In that treaty, England at last, 22 years after Bruce's coronation, formally recognized Scotland's independence and Robert the Bruce as its lawful king. The chains that had long bound Scotland were finally broken, and that liberation began on that June day, on the marshy field by the stream of Bannockburn. The battle proved that the will for freedom, coupled with tactical genius, could overcome even the mightiest empire. Bannockburn became a symbol not only of Scottish independence, but of the triumph of infantry over cavalry. Bruce and his schiltrons showed that the age of the all-powerful knight on the battlefield was ending. A new era of warfare had begun, one in which discipline, tactics, and mastery of terrain mattered more than armor or noble birth. The Battle of Bannockburn is not merely a date in a history book. It is a turning point whose echoes still resound today. Robert the Bruce's victory secured Scotland's independence, which in one form or another endured for centuries. Without Bannockburn, the modern map of Britain, and perhaps of Europe, might look entirely different. The legacy of the battle lies in its status as a classic example of asymmetric warfare. It is the story of David versus Goliath, where a smaller, cleverer, and more motivated force defeats a clumsy giant. Bruce proved that careful preparation, knowledge of the terrain, and psychological warfare could outweigh sheer numbers. Military academies around the world still study Bruce's tactics. His use of engineered obstacles, his brilliant choice of ground, and his ability to turn the enemy's strengths into weaknesses have all become textbook examples of strategy. He did not merely win a battle, he wrote a manual on warfare. For Scotland, Bannockburn became the founding myth of the nation, a symbol of endurance, unity, and unbreakable will to freedom. Robert the Bruce, once a controversial noble who had slain a rival in a church, became a founding father, a hero king who united his people and gave them a future. The monument to Bruce that stands on the battlefield gazes over the land where his country's fate was decided. It has become a place of pilgrimage for Scots and for all who cherish stories of the struggle for freedom. The battle reminds us that even in the darkest times, one man and one army can change the course of history. Bannockburn also marked the beginning of the end of the age of chivalry. It proved that disciplined infantry with long spears could stop and then destroy the finest cavalry. What began at Bannockburn would later be confirmed at Crécy and Agincourt, where English archers would decimate French knights. The feudal, knight-based army was giving way to new organized forces. The battle also demonstrated the power of unity. Before Bruce, Scottish clans and lords had feuded endlessly. Only a shared threat and a charismatic leader could unite them for a common cause. Bannockburn was not the victory of a single clan, it was the victory of an entire nation standing as one. Ironically, after winning its independence from England, Scotland would one day unite with it, but on different terms. When the Scottish King James II inherited the English throne in 1603, it was a union of crowns, not conquest. Bruce's legacy allowed Scotland to enter that union not as a subjugated province, but as a proud and independent kingdom. Today, when we look upon that old battlefield, we see not just grass and a stream, we see the place where a nation was forged. We see proof that the genius of one man and the courage of thousands can defy an empire and prevail. Bannockburn remains an eternal reminder that no chains can hold a people who choose freedom. The story of Robert the Bruce teaches us that defeat is not the end. It is merely a stage. His journey from outlaw hiding from his enemies to triumphant king at Bannockburn is one of the greatest tales of perseverance in history. It is a lesson that one must never surrender as long as there is will to fight. We traveled from a desperate act in a church to the fields of Bannockburn, where the fate of Scotland was decided. The story of Robert the Bruce is not just a tale of battle. It is a saga of how one man, driven by an idea, was able to unite a nation and challenge the mightiest empire of his time. He proved that mind, tactics, and terrain matter more than gold and steel. Bannockburn left an indelible mark on history, showing that even the heaviest chains can be cast off. This victory became a source of inspiration for generations of Scots and for all peoples fighting for their independence. What other great battles or commanders do you think changed the course of history, not by strength, but by cunning? Suggest topics in the comments for future episodes you'd like to see on our channel. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dives into the great events of the past.